and welcome to the Midlife Pilot Podcast. This is a podcast all about flying, learning to fly, the art of aviation. Brian,
I didn't say a word.
It's also a technical feat of excellence that we produce for you once every 2 weeks here on the YouTube channel and wherever you get your audio podcasts. And we're glad you're here. My name is Chris Moran. I have a channel on YouTube called The Midlife Pilot. And to my left, my right, your left is the legendary co-host, Brian Siskin. Good evening, sir.
But where am I based out of, though? You have to have
based out of Music Row, the heart of Music Row, heart of Skid Row, Nashville, Tennessee.
Hey, man, how's it going? I'm glad to be here. I'm super excited about our guest today. I'm glad to see everybody's in the chat. Super excited. And quick shout out to Steve Cross, who soloed today. I got to witness that. That was real cool. Congrats to Steve.
Awesome. Way to go, Steve. And I've already seen a great contingent of our faithful friends in the chat tonight. And I know there's going to be a lot of questions for our guest about flying clubs. That has become a topic. I think it is partially, and not in any small part, to the fact that I talk about the one that I'm in a lot. And there always seems to be questions, and we decided we could probably make a whole episode about it. And there was enthusiastic encouragement for that. So that's what we're going to do tonight. I do have to take a minute and ask you, I know you've been doing some flying and some new aircraft. What's been going on with you there?
Well, I just wanted to be more like you. And so
can't blame you.
I got my hands on and it's actually interesting we're talking about the flying club thing, because I've been sort of in these sort of pseudo kind of clubs and various things, but I'm in a situation now where I just needed a different situation, and I started flying an Archer yesterday, and then I'm flying it again tomorrow, and then I'll be good to go. It's kind of a neat sort of alternative to the conventional club thing, I suppose, because clubs here, like there's a 2-year waiting list to get, in the Lebanon Flying Club or various clubs around here. So you have to find things. And I got a creative sort of rental arrangement where it's essentially 4 pilots kind of doing a little bit of a co-op rental quarterly with sort of prepaid set of hours. And we just kind of work it out among ourselves for the schedule. And you can take it overnight and you can do whatever you want and all that. Cool. So anyway, pretty cool. And then otherwise, the big news is that I finally got signed up with Catherine Cavagnaro to do spin training on December 7th. So I've got a lot of time to get freaked out about that, but I'm super excited about getting spin training and being with a legend, flying with a legend.
That's awesome. I'm very jealous. That sounds amazing.
We'll see how it goes. We'll see. Don't be jealous too quickly.
I'm excited for you. Well, I got to do a little flying too since we last talked. It was actually time for my flight review, which had been 2 years since my check ride, and I got to go out with a great flight instructor who teaches some students that are in our club. Her name's Victoria. The video is coming out Friday, so that's October 7th on the channel. It was kind of cool because it was a VFR flight review that actually turned into I got to log 0.6 of an hour of actual instrument time, and ended up with an instrument lesson and shot a RNAV approach to minimums at my home airport. So, it was like, it's a bonus flight review. It's a flight review plus some instrument training all in one. So we had a great time. The video is awesome. I think you guys are going to really have a good time. Victoria's great, great personality. So some of the people in the chat have already seen the video from my Patreon page, and the rest of it will be for the rest of you on Friday. So it should be fun.
And it's another reason for people to get on your Patreon, because you do a great job of giving the full length flights too. And you get a lot out of it. So that one's particularly a great one. She's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's a good time. I say we say hi to Drew. What do you say?
Yeah.
Welcome everybody. Our guest tonight is Drew Myers. Drew is with AOPA's Flying Club Initiative. Thank you for a last minute for agreeing to join us tonight and talk about one of your favorite topics, I know, flying clubs.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here, everyone.
For sure. So I met Drew in 2020, when I had a crazy idea to start the Fairmont Flying Club that I run, the plane that I was training in that you guys are familiar with, 52 Lima, the orange interior 172, the owners were renting it to me for my flight training, and they said, we're not going to do that anymore. It's costing us too much insurance. We'll let you finish your check ride, and then we're not going to rent anymore. And I thought, well, what am I going to do? And I'd done some research, found some of the great resources on AOPA's site for flying clubs, and asked Drew some questions, and then went back to the owner and said, if I start a flying club, can I lease your plane? And they were like, we would love something like that. And that's how the club was born. And so we've kind of stayed in touch since then. And it's been
I think you had the record.
helpful.
You had the record for the fastest flying club from first contact to operational flying club. I think
it was like a week.
Yeah, I was blown away. I mean, I've been doing this for 3 years now, and there's people that I started talking to when I first joined AOPA that are still working on their club. So yeah, it's awesome. Definitely a process.
Well, we got lucky. We had a handful of people who were equally eager to have something going, and we just kind of got it off the ground. But what's really amazing to me is what's happened since then. So that was September of 2020, and here we are, October 5th, 2022. And we started with 6 members, and as of today, the club is at 36 with 3 airplanes in little rural West Virginia. And it's and there's no sign of it stopping. And I think some of that is the demand. I mean, people are, the aviation industry, people are searching for flight opportunities. And I think some of that is kind of driven it, but more than half of our membership are people in very similar cases to me, people kind of in my stage of life, just looking for aircraft to fly that are, in good condition and are affordable. And flying clubs, I think that's one of the magic to clubs, is that I don't think there's a better way to fly airplanes affordably than when you do it with a group of other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I can't agree with you more, man.
So you've been at this for a while. You're also a pilot. Is that true? How long have you? Tell us a little about your aviation. What's your kind of aviation background?
Yeah, sure. So I got into aviation. I got my aviation merit badge when I was like 14. And part of that was I got a ride in the Cessna 150. And it was just like a quick around the pattern thing. And the pilot let me have the controls for a few seconds, and I was just completely hooked. I started saving my money. I started reading flight manuals, everything. And ended up soloing on my 16th birthday, but never finished my rating in high school because I was painting houses over the summer to pay for my flight training, and it just wasn't progressing fast enough. So I hung it up, went to college, graduated, moved to Maryland. I'm originally from Central Pennsylvania, and then moved here to Maryland, and started saving money again and finished my pilot's license. I did that at Freeway Airport, which is in just outside the Freeze in the Washington Special Flight Rules area. Mm-hmm. Did that in 2015, and I've been an active pilot ever since. I now am a instrument rated commercial pilot working on my CFI. So that's pretty cool. And awesome. Then on the flying club side, I've been a member of Free State Flying Club since 2018. I joined. I was also on the wait list for over 2 years to join that club, but it was a really nice operation, and I knew a lot of the pilots that were members there, so I knew it would be a good fit for me and the type of flying I like to do. So yeah, I joined that, and I've been active. I am now the safety officer, and I help out with the maintenance team as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's been a fun journey, and I'm very fortunate that I get to stay current, and I haven't really been rusty in my flying career, which I'm very, very fortunate about. And then in 2019, September 2019, I left my other gig. I used to sell paint, work for Sherwin-Williams Paint Company, so I sold paint to pay for my flying, and then I turned pro and joined AOPA as the manager of the Flying Clubs initiative. So it's been a really fun gig. Awesome people. I mean, Chris, you said it perfectly. I mean, sharing an airplane is probably one of the best ways to access flying. And it really is like the essence of aviation and what's so great about aviation, because it's, people are passionate. It's a community, and, the common ground is the airplane. So the people that I get to work with are just, they all get it. They get that, a journey shared is a journey cherished. And so it's just really fun to talk to people all over the country. We've helped form, I think we're up to 213 clubs in the 6 years we've been doing this all over the country that we've started. And we support a network of over 1,000 flying clubs that we recognize all over the country.
That's fantastic. And there are great resources online, not just for people interested in starting a club, which we're going to get into all of that, all the nuts and bolts of some of that here in a minute. But for people searching for flying clubs, you guys have done an excellent job with your directory. And this is the URL, I believe, youcanfly.aopa.org/flying-clubs.
Yeah.
And there are other ways to get there. That is the way that I do it. But there are I update my profile pretty regularly with current information on our club, but I look around at other clubs. It's a great resource just to kind of see what other people are doing, what else is out there, what kind of clubs exist. But it's been fun to watch that map grow. I mean, even over since ours started in 2020, to kind of see new people pop up on the map. And the next time I go like that, it's like, oh, that club wasn't there the last time I looked. Or
yeah.
So you can kind of keep track of what's happening there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fundamentals for a minute. What constitutes a flying club? I mean, is that a fair question? What is a flying?
Oh, yeah.
What makes up a flying club? What defines a flying club?
Yeah. So there's a couple different definitions out there, and we'll start with, naturally we'll start with what the FAA considers a flying club, and they call it's a nonprofit member-run organization for the express purpose of sharing aviation amongst the membership, right? So flying clubs, by definition, do not provide services to the public. They're exclusive member owned and run organizations. No one person can profit off of a flying club, and only members of the flying club are allowed to access and use the airplanes. So the exclusivity of that is very important, and because of that, because they're exclusive organizations, airport managers and the FAA treat flying clubs as individuals. So they're not regulated like you would see a commercial operator on the field be regulated. So that's the gist of it. And of course, a flying club is always nonprofit. They're not a for-profit venture in any sense of the word.
And so that the exclusive use part is the one that took some explaining as we were pursuing aircraft leases. Like in our case, and I think a lot of clubs we should probably also define the kind of like the equity versus non-equity clubs before we get too deep into these weeds. So can you touch on that briefly? Like there's equity clubs and there's non-equity.
Yeah. And mixes of the two as well. So generally speaking, flying clubs can own their airplanes in two different ways. Or sorry, I should say they can access their aircraft in two different ways. Either the club owns the airplane outright or is making payments on it on a loan. Those clubs are called equity flying clubs. And by extension of that, every member owns a share of the club and the club's assets. So the share values are typically, higher. My club is an equity club, and our buy-in is, I think last I checked, is like $6,800 for a 2 airplane club that we own outright. The other option for clubs is the non-equity route, where the club is an exclusive lease of an aircraft. And it's a little bit different. Some people kind of call it a lease back, and that's not really correct. A lease back to like a flight school, anyone can walk in off the street and through that flight school rent that aircraft. With a flying club lease, it's exclusive, so only members of the flying club can access and fly the airplane. So, Chris, if you owned an airplane and leased it to my flying club that you weren't a member of, you couldn't fly it. So It has to be exclusive. And the FAA, again, they want the club to have, quote, owner-like privileges is what they call it. So, yeah.
I tried to convince a lender that what I was going to do with my airplane wasn't a lease back because it was going to a flying club, but they don't see it the same way that we do.
So that's why I always belabor that point, because it's way different than the lease back. And when you're talking, and by the way, the non-equity route with the clubs that we've been forming lately with the price of used aircraft and new aircraft too, it's a lot easier for a club to form by leasing an airplane. So, one selling point you can have with an owner is, hey, look, you're going to lease your airplane to us, but you'll know who's flying it. Only this group of pilots are going to be flying it. It's not going to be, most clubs don't do a ton of flight training. I mean, you can certainly do flight training in the club, but now I'd like to talk about that some more. But generally speaking, clubs are usually more proficiency flying, right? So it's active pilots who aren't training. They're not beating the snot out of the airplane in the pattern every day.
That's right.
So, yeah.
So in our case, we made the decision at the formation of the club, partially because we wanted to get up and running so fast, and we had someone that was willing to lease their plane to us. We made the decision at the beginning to be a non-equity club. that entered into exclusive use lease with our airplane owners. And that was the fun point to try to explain to airplane owners, like, yes, so when you sign the lease, it explicitly states like you can't, that the owners no longer can like rent it to other people on the side, and they can't access their airplane without being bona fide members of the club as well and paying their lease, paying the club rates for the planes as well. And that's worked out really well. And the reason I'm an advocate, it's not for there are clubs that make sense to be equity clubs, especially if you have a small group of people who want to kind of be together on an airplane or whatever. There's ways to make that work. I've been a proponent of the non-equity route because I think it allows for kind of a more nimble approach to the club. First of all, the club we report zero assets. We own no assets. So for tax, it's a much easier, it's much cleaner from the taxation perspective and what the organization owns, but also as the kind of makeup of the club changes through its stages of life, it's a lot easier to, as a lease expires with an owner, say, we're not going to renew this lease for this airplane. This next lease, we're going to lease this other airplane. It allows the club to be a little bit more flexible in terms of what its available aircraft are at any stage of its life. So we haven't found that yet, and that we haven't gotten rid of any planes. We've just been adding more leases to our group. But it's also, do you find, sorry, Brian, you can have a minute. Does it, I've dominated because we're on a topic that I love, but have you found in working with other clubs, are a lot of clubs, the aircraft that they're leasing, are they often leased from LLCs that are members owned, like members of the club own the planes that they're leasing back to their clubs? Are you finding that?
Yeah, that's generally the case. It's someone who's either a member of the club or very, very close to the club. And it may be someone that's, they don't have time to be in the club. They have this airplane that they want to see flown more. So they know the club very intimately. I don't see a lot of, people that own 10, 15 airplanes that lease in the flying club. That's very rare. And that's kind of pushing the boundaries a little bit, I think. So that's typically what it is. And by the way, you can be a club that owns one airplane and leases another airplane too. So that was our club last year. We decided we had room in our hearts for another airplane. So we expanded and ended up buying a Cardinal, but we're really close to leasing a Cherokee. That the owner at a local airfield, the typical situation for a lease is someone owns the airplane. They're maybe not getting the utilization out of it that they'd like. As you know, airplanes need to fly to stay healthy, right? So, but they don't want to sell it, and they don't want to, they obviously don't want to see it in a flight school. So that's a good opportunity. If you have like some hangar queens on your airport, and that this is something you can kind of approach the owner with and say, hey, look, I've got this group of folks that want to use your airplane. It's it's all above board. Here's our bylaws. Here's the lease agreement. And kind of go from there. So that is also an option to own and lease an airplane at the same time.
Are there people that you're like hawking at your airport where they're like, dude, no, you come every 2 weeks. I hear from you. This is driving me nuts. Like, no, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be in your cult.
We had tonight. Actually, we had an airport. We had a flying club board meeting tonight, and literally one of the discussions was we were throwing out tail numbers of planes on the field. People we were going to approach. We have an overhaul coming up on our workhorse, our 172, an engine overhaul. It's going to be out for 3 months. So we were trying to kick around this idea of a short-term lease to replace it while it's out. And we were literally like naming people and making notes of people we were going to call this week to see if we can lease their airplane for a while. So that's nice. That is how it is, Brian. We're eyeballing up the people around our airport trying to snag somebody's airplane.
So yeah. Well, so one of the things I'm curious about is just, and I think it's important to maybe reflect as I learn a little bit more about it too. Is one of the things I've found a legitimate actual flying club. There's a spirit about it that is really about, like you said, proficiency, but also a safety culture. And you said that you're a safety officer.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm just curious, and we don't have to like sort of cut into the middle of it, but maybe we can get illuminated on just, what are the general roles and responsibilities structurally in a flying club? Who's running it and how does that work? And then I'm really specifically interested in the safety officer and your role and how that works.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we're to start with that. So, legally and flying clubs should be structured as a nonprofit corporation. So you have to have your president, your secretary, your treasurer. Those are like the main officer or board of director roles that you have to have. Because clubs are social organizations, it's a really good idea to have a social officer, someone that's going to plan the barbecues, plan the cookouts, plan the plane washes and things like that. And that's really another thing that separates flying clubs from other forms of aircraft ownership. Like you're in, it's kind of like a fractional ownership, kind of like a plane share type of agreement. There's not really, there maybe not isn't like a social aspect to that, right? You're working with the pilots. It's a business transaction. That's how most airplane co-ownerships are. If something breaks on the airplane, we all pitch in to fix it, but we share the airplane evenly. Flying clubs are by definition social, so there is a lot of benefit to that, and especially if you're a rusty pilot or someone who's who had got their license and wants to keep flying, a flying club is just a great way to do that. And I could go down that path forever. But back to the officer positions, so you got your president, vice president, secretary, treasurer. They handle all the bookkeeping and the necessary reporting for a club. You also have to have a maintenance officer, someone that's going to oversee the maintenance and keep that running. That's a very important job, and it can be a lot of work even for one airplane. So I was never the maintenance officer, but I was what we call a plane captain. So I reported to the maintenance officer. So we were kind of like the boots on the ground. If something broke on the airplane, we were the first people to go out to the airport and kind of check it out and get the wheels in motions for a repair. So that's a really important role. And then the safety officer. So my job, I kind of set the tone for the safety culture at the club. I handle all the checkouts for and onboarding the new members to make sure that they are properly trained in their airplanes. And the other cool thing about flying clubs is you're going to see airplanes that you probably would never be able to rent.
Yeah.
And our workhorse is also a 172, but it's a highly modified 172. It's a Franken Cessna. We've got power flow exhaust. We have electronic ignition. All these cool, we have an autopilot that actually works. All this cool stuff. That as a renter, I'd never experienced any of that, and I'd flown, I've flown hundreds of hours in 172s by the time I joined the club, and I had to learn all this stuff. So having a good checkout program is so important, and that really sets the tone for this club is serious. They're taking it they're going to this length to get me checked out in this airplane. So that's a big thing for a club, I think, is that how you handle the onboarding process will really set the tone for your members. Besides that, there can be, we have a bunch of other kind of random officer positions, basically whatever you need. And to keep the club operating, we had a airplane acquisition committee, when we were specking out purchasing a second airplane. So those are the roles. And you'll find, some people are going to be more active in the club. I used to be super active. I just had a son 4 months ago, so I'm kind of pulling back a little bit, but yeah, so it's a great way to pull on people's strengths. And also we have a lot of, very tech savvy people. So we have a webmaster that handles all of our Google Drives and our websites and things like that. And, everyone's a volunteer. No one gets any compensation for this. So it's all from it's all from our generosity and our passion for the flying club.
We were talking about that while we were kind of gathered around. There's always a handful of people at the airport, whether they're flying or not, kind of in one of the hangars doing something or just hanging out or looking around. And we were actually having a conversation the other day, and I do want to talk about, you said you wanted to come back to training, and I know why you want to do that. And it's important that there are some distinguished, because we do a fair amount of training. So we have 36 members. Okay. 8 of them currently are primary students. So I guess that's not a lot. I mean, that's not a ton. There is some training that occurs and there are, instructors who in our case, are club members who are approved by the club to teach student members. So we'll get into that in a second. Sure. The point I was going to make about the culture was we were talking about the experiences you get just flying around a flying club, people with all different kind of backgrounds, different experience levels, different areas of expertise. Our club is also spoiled to death to have 3 AMPs who are also members. They don't do the work on our planes. We use a local shop to do anything beyond what a pilot could already do on the planes, but we do all of our own oil changes and tires and light bulbs and stuff that we can do. One of our AMPs actually did change a cylinder because we lost a cylinder on a plane while it was in Ohio, and he, thank God, was the pilot who had it out there and could diagnose it in the field. And like, so we, so we're kind of spoiled in that regard. But we were talking about some of our students who get to experience some things that, like, you in a Part 141 school or something, like, you may not have like put fuel in the airplane by the time you get your CFI. Seriously, I mean, we laugh at it, but like, you haven't cleaned a windshield necessarily, or like changed the oil, or seen how any of this stuff works. And the members who are just kind of the student members who are just immersed around all of this other types of backgrounds and experience levels, and the things you get to experience, in my opinion, I'm not trying to like say 61 versus 141 or whatever, but I'm just saying there is a much greater kind of immersion in all of aviation when you find a community like that. And I think that's perfectly in line with the FAA's definition of the spirit of a flying club. I mean, that to me is when I step back as a whole and look at the makeup of our group and I see all of the little sub pieces that are working, I just say, this is the definition. I mean, this is exactly how it was intended to work. And I just think there's so much benefit to being around that.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's great. And, with no profit motive, right? There's no, a lot clubs don't have things like minimum hours if you take the plane out for a weekend or something. So it really, because it allows you to really kind of, gosh, I can't believe I say this, kind of spread your wings as a pilot, right? So you get to go out there, and when I joined the club, it was like probably the first time I was able to do like a weekend cross country flight. So you get to use your pilot's license and go to some cool places, and it's way more affordable. It's more affordable, but you're going to end up spending way more money. It's just right. Your dollars are going to go a lot farther. And by the way, most clubs bill on tack time, right? Because they're not for profit. So, most flight schools, I'm sure you're familiar, bill on hobs. But with tack time, you're only paying for when when the engine RPMs are higher. So the savings there is pretty cool. It was like, I kind of felt like I was robbing the place the first couple of flights in the club playing. Like, whoa, I did this normal flight that would normally cost me like $200, and it was way less. So that's pretty cool. Yeah. And do you want to get into the training aspects too? Like, just talk about that.
I do want to do that. I want to ask this question first. I'm going to start peppering in some of these questions because they're going to back up on us. It is, believe it or not, already, we've been in this 28 minutes already. So I'm going to start peppering these in. I'm going to throw doozies at you. This isn't one of them, but there's one later that I want to talk about.
Okay.
We'll step on the lines of like, we'll tiptoe around the lines of profit and like people that lease their planes to clubs. It's not profit, but we're going to tiptoe in a minute.
Sure. Great.
Josh said, if there's already a flying club that maybe has a long waiting list or is less than ideal for some reason, are there pitfalls to starting a rival one at the same airport? So like dueling flying clubs, like rival flying clubs.
Yeah. There shouldn't be any pitfalls. And if there are pitfalls, then someone's probably not operating correctly. So again, nonprofit, right? So no one's gonna lose income if some of their prospective members go to another flying club, and if that club has a wait list, they probably are pretty vibrant and active, and they're not hurting for members. So there's a market opportunity at that airfield to start another club. I say go for it. And the way that you get in trouble is if you form a flying club on a field and you start taking when I get these phone calls, it's always, my flying club is in trouble with the airport manager because we have these student pilots that left the local flight school to join our club and resume their training. And again, flying clubs cannot compete, cannot promote flight instruction, cannot promote any services to the public. So that's a pretty glaring example of when a club kind of crosses the line and doesn't really share the sandbox, is when they start competing with the for-profit operators.
What is the line? I mean, like, you can't promote flight training. So like, I've looked at about 100 flying club websites throughout the time. I mean, that's not an exaggeration, probably 100. And I do want to talk about, I'm not going to name any regions or any specific things. I know of a flight club in the United States, a flying club that operates as a flying club that is operating for profit. And it's a big one.
Yep.
Which what's the line, Drew? Like, I mean, like a website, for instance, will say something like, we'll have a disclaimer that says, this is a flying club. This is not a flight school. We do allow student members to join and receive training in our club aircraft. Is that a line? I mean, that's not promoting. I mean, we're saying we're not a flight school, but we do allow student members. Is that allowed? I mean, is that line okay?
Yeah, that's okay. And I think so I talk to people all over the country, right? And every airport is its own ecosystem. So the stuff that we promote and that we kind of preach from our soapboxes is stuff that's going to work at every airfield. So, there you can, if you're in a rural area, right? So there's not a lot of flight schools in town, right? I'm guessing there's no flight schools at the field that you're based out of.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. So you're not stealing business from anyone, or possibly doing that. Now, if a flight school started on the field, you may have to kind of change your policies a little bit. And also you have to think about what makes sense for your club. My club, for example, we don't allow student members. There's enough flight training in the area, and we, go get your license, and then the day you get your private, we'll consider you as a member. And, we have reasons for doing that, right? So we don't want, flight training tends to clog up schedules a little bit more. It's more wear and tear in the airplane. And, by the way, when in a flying club, all the members share the cost evenly. So, if you do a lot of flight training, there's more wear and tear that all the members have to pay for. So it has to be what makes sense for you and the club, and also what makes sense for the airport. So yeah, and I think I did see a question or a comment on there. Like there are for-profit commercial operators that call themselves flying clubs. They make you pay it. They make you pay a joining fee. They make you pay dues, and then that's. I mean, that's still a flight school, and that's just a clever way to kind of get some more commitment and money out of you. So
have a staff, have people on salary, like they're paying people. It's
yeah.
I kicked around trying to figure out a way to make that model work when I started this one, and it just doesn't work. If you're playing by if you're operating by the rules and the spirit of the rule, there's no way to do this. There's no way to do that legally
right.
under the and still share all of the benefits that are designated for flying clubs. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, and I mean, and also I should point out too, like I'm not the flying club police. I see this stuff go on, and again, if it works for you in your airport and you can do it, I mean, all the stuff I'm telling you not to do, there are clubs out there that are doing that exact thing, and they're completely fine, right? So you have to do what makes sense, and also you have to think about, if you're thinking about starting a flying club, again, think about what that's going to be like for your members, right? Chris, we're talking about as your club grows, how do you keep people involved? How do you keep people, active in the club? And there definitely is a tipping point where a club gets so big that the members start feeling like members and more like customers, where it's just transactional. Like I pay the money to fly these airplanes and I leave, right? When really clubs should be, it's all about sharing it. It's about, learning about how to maintain an airplane, about, getting to know your members and working together to share aviation. And that's what a club should be in its essence. And when you grow to, 5, 6, 10 airplanes and, hundreds of members, like that's very difficult to kind of get to get that same feel. And it's very hard to get back once you've lost it.
So, well, before we kind of rapid fire, maybe through a lot of these questions, because I don't want to leave people hanging. But I wanted to say, so a lot of this conversation has been in around sort of defining what flight clubs are, how they vary, and what constitutes one, and how to maybe do it on some level. One question I wanted to kind of put out there, because we've got some student pilots in the chat here, and we've got people that are in the middle of getting their license. When you're on the brink of getting your certificate and you're ready to kind of do the next thing, what would be some of the most basic advice you would give to somebody to kind of just, how do I evaluate? I barely understand this arrangement, and okay, 501c3 and for profit, and I don't know, man. I just got my license and I want to fly, and I don't want to fly my training airplanes anymore, and I'm really looking for a club. What are the things I should look for or look out for? What would be your advice to somebody who's looking at a flying club?
Yeah. We actually have a bunch of resources on our website about how to evaluate, how to kind of tire kick and shop for a flying club. But yeah, so I would just encourage you to go to meetings, hang out with the members. Are they welcoming? Will they let you see the club bylaws? Does the airplane fly a lot? Is it an active club? Some red flags for clubs is if they never have meetings and the members don't really connect and engage. That's probably not something you want to try and join, most likely. So yeah, just go to meetings, get a feel for the club. I was very lucky. I mentioned I have a bunch of my friends are members of my flying club, so I got to spend some time in the airplane, go flying in it and stuff, and I went to a few meetings, so that was all really good. And it was like a fit for, like I said, the type of flying I want to do. I like to go places with an airplane, so my club is very our rules are very favorable to longer rental, or not rentals. I shouldn't say that. Longer reservations. Sorry. Yeah. Longer reservations,
longer transactions, longer profitable transactions. I mean reservations.
Yeah. So, just going to meetings and talking to the members is going to be your best bet for finding it, for trying out a new club.
Hey, before we jumped into these questions, Brian, I do want to give Drew a chance to talk about the instruction piece is important. It's an important distinguishment. We kind of touched on, maybe we did touch on all we wanted to say, right? It's just basically that the flying club can't be a school. It can't advertise instruction, but it is allowed to allow students to train in their airplanes with club approved instructors.
Yes, exactly. So a club can never provide a flight instructor. So as a member of the club, you are using the airplane that you have access to, right? And then separately, you hire an instructor and compensate them on whatever terms you agree with. So you should never be in a position where you have to pay the club, and then the club pays the instructor. That's right. Crossing the line to being a flight training provider. And another point to make is, if you're thinking about forming a flying club, really, really kind of look at what you're trying to get out of it there too, right? So if you're forming a club for the purpose of teaching people how to fly, that's probably not the right way to go about it. You want to form a flight school, and by the way, insurance companies are going to see right through that. If you have a high member turnover, a lot of student pilots, if people join the club, get their license, and leave right away, that's going to you're going to see some pretty nasty insurance premiums.
We actually had a couple of meetings where we defined, it's not in our bylaws, but we defined kind of the spirit to be like, we think that we view flight training in our club, allowing flight training in our club is just a natural byproduct of the club environment that we've created. So it's not a mission. And in fact, it's went as far to say, like, if it becomes an interference with the core, mission of highly available, well-maintained aircraft available to our pilot members, then we'll just reevaluate training as a whole. But it's very keenly distinguished. I mean, we love our student members. They bring so much to the atmosphere, and just it's so fun to see people solo for their first time or go take their check rides or whatever. As a culture, we love it, but it is absolutely, like you say, there are other components of it. It's a schedule hog. There's some other components that kind of make it challenging. So it's carefully balanced, and it's working currently in our arrangement, but it's always open for evaluation. But that is a key distinction that you try to make real careful. Like, the club can't offer, like, you can't be the broker of instruction. Like,
correct.
It's not that way.
Yep. Yeah. No services to the public. That's very important. And I will say, though, as in flight training, maybe, but especially once you get your license, the quality of instruction you get in a club is going to be awesome, because typically the instructors, our club has a few instructor members, but a lot of clubs have instructor members that they have another job and they just instruct for fun on the side. So you're not getting the same, the person, and how they teach, and it's a really good way to kind of expand your proficiency and horizons. So I really market flying clubs as a landing ground for someone that just got their license and wants to explore and get out there. So that's the sweet spot for a flying club, is private pilot license and beyond is kind of how I see it.
That's awesome. I'm going to throw some questions at you now. Are you ready for these?
I'm ready.
All right. Elliot asks, I know that profit is a bad word, but is a club a way to offset the costs of ownership? And I'm going to let you answer, and then I'm going to ask a follow-up question.
Okay, great. So if you own the airplane and you lease it to a club, right, it's not going to be, you're not going to get rich. No one's getting rich off of flying clubs. It's just not how it works, right? So if you when you lease an airplane to a club, there's typically a monthly lease fee that the club pays the owner of the airplane, and there's also an hourly flying rate for the consumables, right? The engine, the prop, all the overhaul stuff, all the time-based stuff, and then the club and the owner agree on who's going to fix what and who's responsible for what. So that's how that works. And again, that arrangement, it should never be, the club is not going to be paying you, thousands of bucks a month. It's not going to, especially if you have a note on the airplane, it's probably, you might break even, you might not. Right. So again, the benefit you get as an owner is your plane's getting flown more, and it's getting flown by people that and it's not getting beat up like it would be in a flight school or a commercial operation. So yes, it'll slightly offset the cost. And I will say that, well, someone put it really well. They said a flying club is like 90% of all the magic of owning an airplane. It's all the access is better. The equipment is typically better. All that good stuff. And it's just, the catch is you have to share the airplane with other people. Does that make sense?
That's that. And so my follow-up question was going to also be, we did a lot of maneuvering early on when we were adding planes. So we had a lot of, without going too deep in the weeds, the original, the starting up of the club, one of the board members of the club was also the owner of the airplane that he was leasing the club. So we had to recuse him from any of those negotiations. There was a lot of legal kind of stuff to jump on. And in fact, we ultimately made some other changes, but just to kind of alleviate any appearance of that kind of conflict of interest. But I was going to comment, you hit the nail on the head. Like I lease a plane to the club that I run. And so I also had to be like, y'all are going to have to decide if this is the plane that you want. And it worked out that it was, but we do have a loan on the airplane. And so we are not getting rich, but I think in this economy, it was the right place at the right time as well, though, because of the appreciation of aircraft over the last 3 years. What you're effectively doing is having another organization that is paying the cost to own it and to operate it and to maintain it while it appreciates in value. So at the end of the lease term, I may come out ahead because I haven't paid anything on the note, but it's paid for. Yeah. And now I have the assets, but it's not a cash flow. Like you say, nobody's making money. Nobody's making money in flying clubs. It's only the asset that's appreciating. And so there's that.
Yeah. The stuff that kind of makes my skin crawl. I mean, you get people that you talk to them like, yeah, I want to form a club. I own this airplane. I want to form a club around it. And it boils down to, they want to get a flying club to pay for their new engine or pay for their new panel. And then, rip the airplane away. That's, so people think they can do that, and it's just that's not how it works.
Right. Stephen Caldwell asks, I live in a small area and would love to start a club here. Is there a minimum number of people that would make starting a club not worth the hassle versus a small co-ownership situation?
Yeah. I think a happy number to start a club is 5. You want to have at least 5 people to start. The clubs can be smaller than that. I think we define a club, anything over 3 people is a flying club. If there's a market for it, right, if there's interest, then I think a club is a good way to go. Because with a partnership, it's generally 4 to 5 people is the max you can see in a co-ownership agreement. And insurance will kind of dictate that sometimes. The nice thing about flying clubs is you can scale it, right? You can expand from 5 people to 10 to 15. And generally 10 to 12 people is like the happy number for one airplane. 10 people, that many people sharing an airplane, it keeps the availability up there, but also you get a ton of usage out of the airplane. Mm-hmm. So, so if you have at least 5 people interested and seriously committed, I'd say go for it. I would shoot for 10 because, people are going to kind of evaporate, fall through the cracks a little bit. But yeah, so in those small rural areas, and Chris, you can attest to this. There's a market for clubs in more rural areas that you wouldn't expect.
Absolutely, yeah. There's a demand for airplanes, and they just don't exist. Especially well maintained ones that are available. Fly Sport wants to know how many roles in a small equity club, like with 4 to 8 members. I think this was back when we were talking about like club roles, you would have to have.
Yeah, if you're in a smaller club, you're definitely wearing multiple hats for sure. That's just the reality of it. So someone's going to be the president, someone's going to be the secretary treasurer, some things like that. So I would encourage you to, if you're thinking about forming a flying club, don't have this "I'm going to do it myself" mentality. Definitely find people that are going to be committed and invested and are going to help you out. And the same thing with the services that we provide at AOPA. I'm not going to form the club for you. I'm going to coach and counsel and provide advice and connect you with people who can help you with your problems. But you want people to have ownership and skin in the game, and make it theirs, basically.
That's awesome. Adam would like to know, doesn't a club get cheaper insurance if every member is a licensed pilot? So if you're not offering training?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So insurance, especially, that we could do a whole podcast on aviation insurance.
It's renewal time for us right now. So
we just did that in our club.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So, but generally speaking, a club has to provide a roster to the insurance company. And they list the hours. Have you had any FAR violations? Have you had any accidents? All the standard stuff. And then they kind of look at the least qualified person. For most clubs that are operating, fixed gear, single engine airplanes, which that's the majority of the clubs in this country are flying fixed gear, single engine. Having a low time pilot's not going to kill you. But yes, having student pilots will raise the rates. And I would encourage you, if you're forming a club and you're going to allow student pilots, keep the ratio pretty low. Chris, you have a really good ratio in your club. For like a 10-person club, maybe 2 members can be student pilots at a given time, right? I think that's a happy number. You definitely don't want, it would be a lot more expensive to insure a 10-student club.
Exactly. This is a good one. I forgot, one of our patrons knew you were coming on tonight and had a question. He can't be here tonight, but One Dull Geek, who is a regular with us here on the podcast. If one were to start a flying club, how do you convince yourself that the other people you're inviting to co-own? So these are 2 questions, and I think you seriously, where co-own your airplane are trustworthy enough to be part.
Yeah. So that's a great question, and it's something that Chris, I'm sure you go through this when you're interviewing and screening prospective members in your club, right? So having a solid screening process is a good idea. I've heard of some clubs were actually running like credit checks and background checks. I think that's a little extreme, but I mean, hey, if you want to pay for that, we in our club we get 3 volunteers to do at least an hour-long interview with any prospective member. And you're looking for people who want to join your club first, and then also want to fly the airplane, right? You want members that are not just there to use the airplane. I'm ashamed to admit it, but in the 4+ years I've been in my flying club, there are members I've never met because they never come to any meetings. I've never met them in person. I've maybe talked to them on the phone once. So yeah, you want people that want to contribute to the club. They have things to offer. They like what your club does, and like, here's how I can fit in, right? You want someone that's going to kind of fit into your organization. And also too, the quality of the flying. I mean, people make mistakes, accidents happen. But if someone has a good safety attitude, they take criticism well. They're kind of humble about their flying. I think that's a good sign that that's someone that you can be in a club with. And then also on the other side of that, if someone turns out to be a kind of a bad apple, having strong bylaws and ways that you onboard and outboard people from your club. If someone does something really dumb and it's clear they're not going to be a good member, having a way to effectively bounce them out of the club that won't get you in trouble and is fair and agreed upon by everyone is very important. Because things get contentious. Flying clubs have been sued in the past, right? It does happen. So having good bylaws is very important. And again, that's one of the services that we provide. I am not a lawyer, but I've read hundreds of club bylaws. I know what works and what doesn't. And then also too, I at the end of the day, I'll probably recommend that you run it by an attorney in your state just to make sure.
Excellent.
So everybody can get sued. Doesn't matter where you are. Doesn't matter.
No. And that's the nice thing is, a club is a nonprofit corporation, so that does provide some protection, and directors and officers insurance is a thing in clubs too. So that's another option.
So real quick, how do you not be a bad apple? What are some bad apple examples? Like, what are some things that people have done that are, have made them not be in your club or some other club? Yeah.
People that it's very clear, and that's why we do this interview, right? We don't just take anyone off the street that can pay our buy-in and join our club. If it's someone it's very clear that they're just there to build time to get to the airlines or to get to somewhere, right? Or it's very clear that they want to use the airplane a lot for like business travel or something like that. And by the way, you can certainly use a club airplane for business travel. You cannot use a club airplane to make money. So you can't, fly pipeline patrol or, fly cargo or passengers for hire in a club airplane. So if it's very clear that they're just there to use the airplane, that's the big red flag, and very quickly makes itself obvious in an interview, I think. And then also just, you talk about people's flying. I mean, we had a gentleman try to join our club who had previously balled up a rental airplane at another airport, and just talking to him about the incident and what he took away from it. It was clear that he didn't learn his lesson. Right. So that's part of it. And you check people's logbooks to make sure they're legit. That's another good thing to do. So
you're like, dude, I've got Catherine's report right here.
It was at the shortest runway. It's called, I won't get too specific, but it was a very short runway. And that has claimed a lot of propellers, a lot of nose gear from people focusing and whatnot. Yeah.
All right, man. So one other question I have is, for instance, I mentioned I'm on the waiting list for a club that's actually quite a storied club here in Tennessee. It's the Lebanon Flying Club. And, it's a strange thing because you're like, okay, yes, I want to be on the waiting list, but I've got to start going to their meetings or kind of getting to know them. But it's 2 years out. I don't even know what I'm doing a month from now. You know what I mean? So it's a strange thing to sort of know when or how to approach. I want to keep my spot, and they're not going to take it from me. I mean, I've officially, put myself in line, but my number will come up. But what's the, like, just from a sort of I don't know, almost like a social way, like what is the norm, or what like, should I just start hanging out with them? Like, man, I can't wait to be. Oh yeah, we're totally gonna fly in 2 years, guys.
Right. Yeah, it's tough. And from my side, right, I'm in a flying club that has a wait list, right? So how do I keep you? You're a cool guy. I want you to be in the club, but we have a wait list, right? So we recommend that you kind of have like that active social culture comes into play. So, see if you can join as a social member. You're involved in the club, but you don't have access to the airplanes yet. That's a really good way to stay involved, and go to plane washes and hang out with the pilots. And you'll get rides. You'll get you can't log time as pilot in command in the airplane, but you can safety pilot, right? So you can get to know the airplane and get to know the members ahead of time. So like what I did, I rented all the way up until I joined the club from a local flight school, and I did safety pilot for my friends that were in the club, and I spent a lot of time in the airplane and got to know the members and all that good stuff. So yeah, just try to be active, be a fly on the wall in meetings and stuff. I think that's a good idea.
Eventually, I'll be lurking enough. They're like, just give the guy a spot. Like,
just get in.
Annoy them until they admit you. Perfect.
Drew Myers from AOPA is our guest tonight, talking about flying clubs. There are a couple more questions I want to get to when we go, but before we do, I want to give you a chance. AOPA has for years been an advocate, a strong advocate for flying clubs. I want to give you a minute. You're there to provide resources for people who want to start them, who people want to join them, for existing clubs who have questions. Do you want to take just a minute, talk about what you do at AOPA, what's available to people, and how they can find you to take advantage of these services, which we did for our club. And I can tell you, that's how we got off the ground. I mean, that's how we got the thing launched. It would not have been possible without the support we had from AOPA. No question.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great to hear. Yeah, I appreciate that. So I work for an initiative called You Can Fly. And our entire mission, our purpose is more people flying more. So we have our high school initiative. We have a STEM curriculum that's in over 400 high schools. It's not just making pilots, it's making people who are familiar with the aerospace industry and the career opportunities there. We also have our flight school initiative, which is their purpose is to improve the student pilot experience, to get more student pilots through the program and to their pilot's license, because the attrition rate for student pilots is kind of ridiculous. It's I think it was like 75% of people who start don't finish their license. So we're working on ways to improve that. And one of the ways we've done that is with a adaptive training software and an app that that we're testing now, and it's in student pilots' hands now. So it's called AFTA. Check it out on our website. It's a really good program. Then I come in. So, again, a landing ground for pilots who just got their license. So with the Flying Clubs initiative, and we support and help form flying clubs all over the country. I mentioned earlier, we've formed, I think we're up to 213 flying clubs. And what I do, we're kind of just like subject matter experts, right? I talk to flying clubs all over the country. I help form flying clubs all over the country. So I've seen a thing or two. I know what the challenges are and what the typical pitfalls are for someone that's starting to form a flying club. And also too, we get club calls where the club is struggling, and what can we do? How do we kind of revitalize our flying club? Because like any organization, clubs have life cycles, and my club's been around since 1969. And if you don't adapt and refresh and revitalize your club, it's gonna kind of die away, right? So I get that question a lot too, of like, well, how do I get younger members? There's a bunch of old guys in my club that they're not flying it very much. So like, well, what do we do? So we help with that. We help promote your flying club. We'll help you find members. We'll help. We do like a hosted podcast or a webinar where we'll promote your flying club and explain the benefits of joining to AOPA members in your area. So yeah,
that's great.
Yeah. So and also too, like, I don't have all the answers, but I talk to clubs all day. So I was speaking with someone last week, and they were thinking about adding a diamond to their club. And I was like, all right, well, yeah, this is how you add an airplane. And here are the names of 3 flying clubs that operate diamonds and what that looks like. So yeah, the networking aspect of it is huge. And we have just like we have exemplar clubs. Like Chris, you mentioned you're kind of thinking about doing a consultancy thing. So that, I think that's awesome. And yeah, so just talking to other flying clubs who have been through it, I think is huge. And then we also publish a monthly newsletter called Club Connector, publishes the 3rd Sunday of every month. And we feature flying clubs all over the country. And then the real bread and butter of it is our question of the month, where we answer, the burning questions about that we get asked a lot. This month we're, spoiler alert for all the listeners on the podcast here. We're going to be talking about officer positions and how do you get people to volunteer for officer positions, and how do you, awesome. How do you keep it from a small group of people doing all the work. So, that's there, and we have a ton of resources on our website. Just go to the AOPA.org flying clubs. And then, you'll find out we have guides, we have sample documents, we have our flying club finder, like you mentioned. That's based on, you can search for a club name, you can search for an airport and see what clubs are there. And by the way, if you're forming a flying club, you can advertise it on that website as well as a club information. And we've seen folks get a lot of interest in their club just by advertising on our finder. So, and then lastly, I got to mention too, we have our Rusty Pilots program under You Can Fly, which helps get people back in the air. It covers the ground portion of a flight review, and it just kind of gets you back thinking about flying in the modern world, especially if I can't imagine if you stopped flying 15 years ago and all the technology and change that's happened. And then finally we have our flight training scholarships as well. So we have from start to finish, we have resources that will help people fly more. That's what we do. And I should also plug that I'm actually not funded by your AOPA membership dollars, although we appreciate everyone being an AOPA member. We are funded by the AOPA Foundation. That's a 501c3 charity that funds programs like this. So and any contributions are always greatly appreciated. Have to plug that.
That's great.
Love it.
Yeah. It's been. I mean, I'm not kidding. I mean, the upfront work that to really understand, I came to you without a really good understanding of how a flying club is structured and what it really looks like. I'd heard the term thrown around and knew of a couple that had some planes and some members. Yeah. But it was tremendously helpful. And I think that, the work that's going into helping expand them across the country is good and needed. And I do think, there's no better way to get connected and involved in aviation after your training than in a flying club. It's on all levels. I just think is the way to do it. And on that note, we're going to answer. I have to ask this question because it's sort of along the culture line of a club. Might be a Chris question, but how do you decide on a number cap for a non-equity club? And Drew, your guesstimates on members per plane was spot on. We added a second. We had too many members when we added a second plane. I think we were up to probably 18. They weren't all actively flying though. That's kind of the trick. Like a lot of them don't fly much. So
yeah.
And then we added our third when we got to 30. So that would be 10 per plane. And at 36 in our meeting today, like I mentioned, we're already talking about number 4. And I don't know when we'll cap it. I think, like you said, when this thing, if it gets to the point where it starts to feel like everybody has a member ID number and I don't know who these people are anymore, we've probably kind of outgrown we've got to that limit probably when we get there. But at this point, we know everybody knows each other, and we're enjoying multiple planes. So our current model is to keep adding planes as we add members until we get to a place where it feels like it's got to a kind of a, everybody's a number situation.
Yeah. And one thing I'll add to that, if you're forming a club, right, everyone's going to be really excited that they're in the flying club and they're going to fly a whole bunch. Right. And as clubs age and, members, ebb and flow in their life, lifestyles, I guess, you'll have, less active members and more active members. So the other limiting factor is going to be insurance. You'll find that the insurance rates you get per number of people, it's generally around 12 to 15 is kind of the max they like to see sharing one airplane. And I say generally, the insurance game is always changing. I think I have a grasp on it, and then I'll talk to a club and they'll tell me something that I thought was impossible or something. So yeah, that is going to be a major consideration if you're thinking about forming a flying club, is the insurance question. So that's an early conversation you need to have, is with an insurance broker.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well, this has been excellent. This was super informative, even for me, who's been doing this for a little while now. And I hope everybody enjoyed. Thanks again for jumping on at short notice. I'm very excited.
Sure, yeah.
I hope the weather cooperates later this month. Drew is coming to our neck of the woods, knock on wood, to actually do a presentation at our Flying Club's fall social event.
Yeah, I can't wait.
It's going to be a good time to see everybody and meet everybody and kind of see what we've got going on in Fairmont.
Can I get on the waiting list for your club, Chris?
Yeah, it's. You could join right now.
You'd be the perfect member because you pay the dues and never fly the airplane.
we're actively accepting those kind of members, Brian. So
remote members welcome.
Nice.
I'll send you the application tonight, and you can fill it out and get back to
awesome. So you're going to go to Fairmont. That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. Actually, I've been to Fairmont. I landed there to get gas once. And then that was like right before, a couple months before Chris called me. So I was like, oh yeah, I know Fairmont.
You guys should get that on a t-shirt, Chris. You're Fairmont.
That's right.
I landed there to get gas once
and haven't been back because there's not much else to see. Right. But now there's a flying club. So
yeah. A guy did come out and offer me a bottle of water, which I was very impressed with. So I'm like, wow, this is that Southern hospitality, right?
Came out of the shack and
the shack, yeah.
Handed you a bottle of water. Drew, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Tonight. Yeah, it's been great stuff. I hope everybody found it helpful. Check out his stuff, AOPA.org/flying clubs.
Yeah. And my email address is my first name, Drew, my last name, Myers, MYERS, @AOPA.org. So I'd love to hear from you.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much. Brian, thank you for podcasting with me tonight. We'll do it again. We'll do it again in 2 weeks. Thank you, Drew. Thanks, everybody, for the great questions in the chat tonight, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
All right. See ya.